Hey, Zach here. And if you couldn't tell by my outfit, it's Renaissance Fair season. And if you're a Therian or a furry, you would know that that's a great place to go public suiting. So if you find yourself going to a Renaissance Fair soon, here's some Renaissance Fair themed DIY crafts for Therians and furries. Idea 1. Modifying your mask to make it wearable on a belt. Now you may have seen tons of other Therians doing this, but didn't know quite how to do it yourself. Well, good thing, it's actually very simple. For our example today, I'm going to be using a very old mask I made a long time ago. So the very first thing you're going to want to do is move the elastic to the front of the mask. Then you're going to flip it back over and grab your elastic. For this tutorial, I'm just using some scrap elastic I had laying around, but any type of elastic will really work as long as it's not super thin or elastic cord. So the very first thing I'm going to do is cut it in half. Then, take one piece of the elastic you just cut and fold it into a loop. Once you do that, put hot glue on one end of the elastic and glue them together, sealing in the loop. Remember to only put hot glue on the very ends of it. We don't want the whole loop to be glued together, just the very ends. Once you've done that, repeat the process on the other piece of elastic. After that, we're going to glue on the pieces of elastic. Once again, we're going to use our hot glue gun to add a little bit of hot glue on the very end, and then we're going to glue it on the back of the mask. Make sure that the loop is sticking up. And for one final time, we are going to repeat that on the other side. Now you could stop here, but if you want to make sure it's extra secure, I recommend following this next step. Take a small piece of scrap fabric and line it up over the loops on the back of the mask. Feel free to trim it down to size if it is too big. Now that we have it the exact size we want, put a ton of hot glue on the back of the mask where the loops are. And the final step, take the piece of scrap fabric and press it over. The reason we do this is to help secure it and to prevent it from breaking or falling off. But it also makes a much more comfortable fit so you don't have any scratchy hot glue on your forehead. Now that we're finished making the mask, the next thing to do is attach it to a belt. Depending on the type of belt you have, this may or may not fit, so be sure to make your elastic big enough for your belt. You can attach your mask to the belt by feeding the belt loop through each individual loop. Be sure to do this one at a time and make sure the first bit of the belt is all the way through the loop before putting it through the next one. If you have a larger belt, this can be a bit tricky. Just be patient and careful and you should have a wonderful mask on your belt. Hooray! And this is what it should look like when you're wearing it. I don't personally do this, but if you wanted to hide the elastic, you could place the elastic loops a little lower on the mask, but it could get uncomfortable when actually wearing the mask. Idea 2. Paws and tails. Tails are pretty much a staple of Renaissance fairs. Therians wear them, furries wear them, and even the average guest can be caught wearing the occasional tail. And if you don't have a tail, fear not. There's often booths at the Renaissance Fair selling plenty of tails. Just make sure to ask if they're ethically sourced before you buy. As you can clearly see, I've gone a little crazy on the tail collection. All of my tails are either ethically sourced or secondhand. And while we're on the subject of hands, paws are a great thing to wear. And fear not, furries, you can also wear your normal non-real tails at the Renaissance Fair. Another DIY option is to make a yarn tail. I don't personally own a yarn tail, but there's plenty of tutorials on YouTube if you'd like to make one. And they can actually get pretty realistic, so be sure to check that out. Idea 3. Therian Badge Ornament. Before we start this tutorial, I would just like to note that I recorded this and then immediately lost all the footage, so now I have to do it all over again. So y'all better enjoy the heck out of this. Alright, back to the tutorial. So as you've probably already seen, we're taking a piece of cardboard and tracing a circle onto it. This part isn't really too exact, you don't have to use a template or anything, just sketch out a basic circle, and you can also draw your design onto it if you'd like. Although I'm not a Therian, I just decided to make this a Therian symbol because I know a lot of my fans are Therians. So the next step is to cut out the circle. Again, it's nothing fancy, just take a pair of scissors and carefully cut around the edge. When you're finished, it should look something like this. After that, very carefully drill a hole with some scissors. This is where we're going to add the string to the ornament. It's very important to do this step now as it'll be way too difficult later. Once you're done, it should look like this. Next, you're going to take your fabric or material that you're going to cover the top with. For the best results, I recommend using a brown leather or other earth tone materials. But really any fabric you want to use is totally fine. So what we're doing right now is we're tracing around the circle. But do not cut out that circle. Instead, trace another circle around the existing circle so we can fold it over properly. Once you finish tracing, you can cut out the big circle. Be sure to not accidentally cut out the small circle or else you'll have to start over. Once you're finished, it should look like this. Also make sure to check that it is in fact bigger than your piece of cardboard. Now the next step is to cover the circle in tons of hot glue. Then place the fabric on top, trying to keep it as centered as possible. Then press down and wait for it to dry. After that, we're going to flip it right on over, and then cut lines in the overlapping fabric. This process is very similar to how you felt a cat mask, although depending on the material it may be a little trickier. Then, just like a cat mask, we're going to apply glue to those little pieces and start folding them over. Repeat this process over the entire badge until every single one is folded over and the badge is covered. When you're finished, it should look like this. Then we're going to use our scissors to poke a small little indent into the fabric. This indent should go right where the hole was in our cardboard. When you're finished, the leather should be slightly raised. If you're using a thinner fabric, you can skip this step and just drill all the way through. But if you are using a harder material like me, you can then take a small blade and cut 4 triangles on the hole. It's sort of like if you were to cut a pizza with 4 slices only. Also, it should go without saying, if you are younger, please get an adult to help you with this. Next, take an object that can fit through the hole and push all those triangles inward. And for certain materials, you may need to add a bit of glue to make them stay, but mine stayed right in there without it. Next, for the back of the badge, we're going to take another piece of fabric. This can be any fabric you want, but in this case, I'm using some short brown fur. Then we're going to apply hot glue all over the back of the badge. Be sure to get right up on those edges so there's no gaps. Then just smack it right down onto the fabric. I don't know why, but I got really aggressive here. I guess I just really wanted that badge to stick. And for the final step in constructing the badge, we're just going to trim around the edge and get all that excess fabric off. It looks best if you get it right on the edge, so there's no fabric hanging off the side of the badge. Then, just like we did before, we're going to drill a small hole, just so we can get our thread in there. But before we do that, we can draw on our design. I personally use this white paint marker, but you could use a Sharpie or any other type of marker that shows up on your fabric. If you're not sure if your marker will work on your fabric, just test it on a piece of scrap before you actually add it. This is what it looks like when I'm done. Again, you can add any design you want. I just added the Therian symbol because it's simple and easy. Then you're going to take your thread or yarn and feed it right on through. And I cannot exaggerate enough, you're only seeing the end of this. It took me like 30 million tries. It kept getting tangled or it just wouldn't poke through. It was a nightmare, but I got it done. And it would have probably been easier if I didn't double up the thread, but it was a little too late to go back. And now we're done. Look at that. All you have to do now is tie it onto your belt and boom, you've got a little hanging ornament. And with that, we are done. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. And I hope you found these tutorials useful and you can wear them to your next Renaissance festival. See you next time, guys. Bye!